The cameras were rolling, the lights already blazing, but no one expected what came next. Yandy lowered her eyes, her voice unsteady, and spoke words that froze the entire room. This wasn't a casual spat over Instagram posts or petty jealousy about who follows who. This was something no one thought they would ever hear. A confession. Her voice cracked as she admitted forming an emotional bond with someone outside her marriage. The moment landed like an earthquake. Shockwaves rippled instantly through the cast, the crew, and everyone watching. Gasps filled the space. Mouths hung open. The tension was so thick it felt like time itself had stopped moving. This wasn't scripted drama. This wasn't staged chaos. It was raw, vulnerable, and dangerous. For the first time on camera, Yandy admitted her heart had strayed even if her body had not. And that single truth shattered the air around her. You could see it in every reaction. Castmates staring in disbelief, producers glancing nervously at one another, realizing they had captured a moment that would dominate headlines. Fans who had followed Yandy and Mendeecees for years suddenly confronted a truth that couldn't be brushed off as entertainment. It wasn't another argument about money. It wasn't another storyline about loyalty online. This was the unveiling of a wound so personal that even speaking it aloud seemed unbearable. And yet, she said it, out loud, on camera. The silence afterward was deafening. The weight of her words hung in the air, pressing on every single person in that room. It was the kind of revelation that can't be undone. A moment that felt less like reality TV and more like history being made. Mendeecees leaned forward, his expression unreadable, his tone steady, but sharp enough to pierce the silence. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply spoke 4 words that sliced deeper than any insult ever could. Worse than cheating. The room shook with the weight of that statement. It wasn't shouted in rage. It was spoken with a chilling calmness, making it echo even louder. Those words carried the sting of betrayal, the kind that leaves scars you can't see but can always feel. Everyone froze. Friends exchanged uneasy glances. Castmates covered their mouths in disbelief. And fans who later watched it unfold online felt shivers race down their spines. This wasn't just a husband confronting his wife. This was a man revealing his pain in the rawest way possible. Why did it cut so deep? Because physical cheating can sometimes be excused as a mistake of the flesh. But an emotional affair is different. Invisible to outsiders, hard to define, yet undeniable once exposed. It means the heart has wandered. It means trust has been given to someone else. And for Mendeecees, that was a wound far beyond forgiveness. His words didn't just target Yandy. They targeted every person listening, forcing them to confront the uncomfortable truth. Emotional betrayal doesn't leave lipstick stains. It doesn't leave obvious clues. But it destroys from the inside quietly until nothing is left standing. The verdict landed like a hammer. Calm, final, irrevocable. Worse than cheating. And in that instant, everyone in the room and every fan watching from afar understood the magnitude of what had just been confessed. The atmosphere shifted instantly. What began as another heated exchange no longer felt like reality TV. It wasn't storyline drama. It wasn't manufactured tension. It was something far heavier. The very core of their marriage was trembling. For years, fans had watched Yandy and Mendeecees weather storms most couples would never survive. They endured prison time. They faced endless gossip, public scrutiny, and relentless rumors. And through it all, their bond appeared unshakable. To many, they were proof that love could survive anything. But this revelation struck a different chord. This wasn't outside pressure. This wasn't the media. This wasn't another rumor they could dismiss. This was internal. It was betrayal, born from within their own relationship, and that made it devastating. The cast could feel it. Conversations died mid-sentence. People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some whispered in disbelief, while others simply stared, stunned into silence. Everyone knew the stakes had changed. Could their marriage withstand this blow? That was the unspoken question in the room. Mendeecees had defended Yandy against the world. He had carried their family through separation, scandal, and sacrifice. But now, faced with this wound, his silence spoke volumes. It was clear this wasn't just another fight they could recover from. This was a crack in the foundation. And foundations, once fractured, rarely hold the same strength again. The energy in the room wasn't chaotic anymore. It was suffocating. Heavy. Like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see if this was the moment everything finally collapsed. Yandy's eyes widened as she rushed to defend herself. Her voice cracked, but her words came quickly. She swore. There had been nothing physical. No touch, no intimacy, no line crossed beyond emotion. She insisted it was conversations only, moments of feeling heard when she felt unseen. But her denial did little to ease the tension. If anything, it thickened the air. Because while she claimed her body never betrayed her husband, Mendeecees reminded her that love was never just about the physical. His words landed heavy. Love, he said, is loyalty. Love is respect. Love is choosing your partner above everyone else. The contrast between her defense and his definition was striking. Yandy wanted the distinction to matter. She wanted the absence of physical contact to mean the betrayal was somehow lighter. But for him, it wasn't. It was heavier. Because the heart, once given away, cannot be reclaimed so easily. The cast sat frozen. Some nodded quietly, agreeing with him. Others whispered that maybe she was telling the truth, that maybe honesty should count for something. But the unease only grew. Every second felt like the walls were closing in tighter. Mendeecees shook his head, muttering that it didn't matter if nothing happened in bed. What mattered was that she had given a part of herself to another man, a part that was supposed to be his alone. And in that moment, the distance between them felt impossible to close. Her defense turned into a reminder of just how deep the wound already was. Mendeecees finally leaned in, his voice low but sharp, and asked the question everyone feared. How long had this been going on? The words sliced through the air like a blade. The room froze instantly. Even the producers, usually eager for drama, braced themselves for the explosion they knew was coming. Yandy hesitated. Her lips trembled. Her hands twisted together as if searching for an answer she didn't want to give. The silence before her reply stretched endlessly, every second amplifying the weight of the moment. Finally, she admitted it began during a time when she and Mendeecees weren't connecting. Arguments piled up. Distance grew. She felt unheard, and in that silence, she turned to someone else. Her explanation landed heavily, but it brought no relief. The cast shifted uncomfortably, realizing the timeline meant this wasn't just a fleeting mistake. It had lasted long enough to matter, long enough to hurt. Mendeecees' face tightened, his jaw clenching as he listened. To him, every word sounded less like an excuse and more like another betrayal. He slammed his hand against the table, not in violence, but in frustration too raw to contain. His message was clear. If she felt unheard, she should have spoken louder. She should have come to him, not gone searching for comfort in another man's ear. The entire room remained silent, suffocated by the gravity of his question and her reluctant answer. For the second time that night, time itself seemed to stand still. Yandy took a deep breath, her voice shaking as she tried to explain. She claimed it wasn't planned. Conversations, she said, just started. One turned into two, then into more. Before she knew it, she found herself confiding in someone who wasn't, her husband. She admitted it wasn't about attraction. It wasn't about wanting another man. It was about feeling heard, feeling seen. She confessed that at home, arguments dragged on, emotions were left unresolved, and the distance between them grew wider by the day. In that gap, she reached for the comfort of someone who actually listened. The words spilled out, desperate, pleading for understanding. But instead of softening the moment, they ignited something else. Mendeecees' expression hardened. His frustration boiled over. His voice rose, breaking through the tension with unshakable force. He shouted that she should have been talking to him. He was her husband. He was the one who stood by her, who carried the weight of their family, who endured separation and sacrifice. And yet, instead of turning to him, she gave her trust to someone else. The eruption left the room rattled. Castmates stared wide-eyed. The crew shifted nervously, unsure if the scene was spiraling beyond control. The contrast was devastating. Her attempt to justify only seemed to deepen his fury. To Yandy, it was about being valued. To Mendeecees, it was about betrayal. And in that clash, the fragile line between explanation and excuse completely shattered. Mendeecees leaned back, his voice steady but laced with pain. He reminded everyone of the sacrifices he had made. How even behind bars, he kept his family first. He called home every day. He stayed present for his children. He trusted Yandy to hold it all together while he served his time. He spoke of loyalty, of years spent fighting to protect his name, his home, his marriage. He said everything he did, every choice, every risk, was for them, for her. And now, faced with this betrayal, he wondered if it had all been in vain. The room split immediately. Some friends shook their heads in sympathy, murmuring that no man deserves to feel this way. Others whispered about accountability, saying that pain doesn't erase responsibility, that maybe he hadn't given her the attention she craved. But no matter which side they leaned toward, everyone agreed. The weight of his words was crushing. Yandy reached out, her hand trembling as she tried to bridge the distance between them. But he pulled back. His recoil was instant, almost reflexive. The gesture alone said more than words could. Trust, once cracked, doesn't mend with a single touch. He stared at her, his silence louder than his anger. He didn't need to shout. The message was already clear. To him, this wasn't just disappointment. It was betrayal stacked against years of sacrifice. The tension thickened. Empathy clashed with judgment. Her reach collided with his refusal. And in that painful standstill, the question lingered. Could a love built on sacrifice survive the sting of betrayal? The tension was unbearable. Voices clashed from every corner. Some begged for calm, urging them to take a breath before saying something that could never be taken back. Others demanded answers, pressing for details that hadn't yet been revealed. The atmosphere felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode. Mendeecees locked his eyes on Yandy. His question cut sharper than any accusation. "Are you holding back?" The words echoed through the room, hanging heavy in the silence that followed. Yandy stammered, insisting she had said everything. She swore there was nothing else to confess. But the hesitation in her tone sparked more doubt than reassurance. Every pause, every broken sentence, every shaky breath, they all made the room believe there was more buried beneath the surface. Friends shifted uneasily. Some whispered that she was telling the truth, that the worst was already out. Others muttered that her body language betrayed her, that maybe the story wasn't complete. The divide grew wider with every second. Mendeecees leaned forward, his voice low but loaded with fire. He told her honesty was the only way forward. If she left even, one detail hidden, everything else they had fought for would mean nothing. His words weren't shouted, but they carried the weight of a breaking point. The pot was boiling. The room could feel it. One more revelation, one more doubt, one more hesitation, and everything would spill over. The questions grew harder, colder, more direct. Mendeecees fixed his gaze on Yandy and asked the one thing no spouse ever wants to hear. "Did you ever think of leaving me?" Her answer came quickly, almost too quickly. She said no. She insisted she never imagined walking away, but the speed of her denial only deepened the suspicion. It sounded rehearsed. It sounded defensive. And that made the unease worse. Then came the second blow. "Do you still feel anything for him?" Zhao. Question landed like a thunderclap. The room froze again, every eye locked on Yandy. She hesitated, just for a moment. But the pause was enough to shatter whatever certainty remained. She finally whispered no, claiming there were no feelings, that it was nothing more than misplaced attention. Yet the delay spoke louder than the words themselves. The silence before. Her denial left everyone wondering if there was more truth hidden beneath her carefully chosen phrases. Castmates shifted uncomfortably. Some believed her. Others didn't. The producers, sensing the intensity, stayed silent, letting the moment suffocate the room. Mendeecees shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. He said feelings don't vanish overnight, and if there was even a second of hesitation, it meant something still lingered. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The weight of his words pressed down harder than any shout. The air grew heavy again. The hardest questions had been asked, but the answers only carved deeper cracks into a marriage already standing on unsteady ground. Mendeecees finally spoke again, his tone calm but cutting like glass. "Love without respect means nothing." The words landed heavy, slicing through the silence like a dagger no one saw coming. For years, fans had praised their resilience. They admired how the couple endured trials that would have broken most marriages. They watched them fight through separation, rumors, and endless public pressure. But now, the image of strength was cracking. What the world saw as unshakable was revealing a side never shown before. Yandy's eyes watered, her lips pressed tight, but she said nothing. The silence was almost louder than an argument. It wasn't shouting, it wasn't chaos. It was distance. A gulf widening right there in front of everyone. The cast sat in stunned quiet, realizing the line between public and private had been destroyed. This wasn't just television drama. This was their real marriage bleeding out in front of cameras. The respect he demanded wasn't for the audience. It wasn't for the headlines. It was for him, for his role as a husband, for the vows he believed still mattered. Fans watching later would replay that sentence again and again. Love without respect means nothing. To some, it sounded like wisdom. To others, like a warning. But for Yandy, sitting inches away, it was a silent dagger piercing deeper than any public accusation. The marriage everyone thought could weather any storm was suddenly standing at the edge of collapse. And the quiet in that room said more than words ever could. Sierra finally stepped in, her voice sharp and uncompromising. "Emotional is worse than physical." The words rang out like a gavel, delivering a verdict no one was ready to hear. The room stirred instantly. Heads turned. Gasps slipped through the silence. Yandy fired back, her voice trembling but fierce. She argued that honesty should count for something, that coming forward, admitting the truth, meant she was choosing her marriage over secrecy. She claimed it was better to confess than to hide, but Sierra wasn't swayed. She said wounds of the body can heal, but wounds of the heart never fade. Her tone left no space for excuses, and the clash erupted. Arguments overlapped. Voices collided. Yandy pleading for understanding. Sierra insisting that some lines, once crossed, can never be redrawn. The back and forth grew louder, heavier, almost unbearable. Mendeecees sat silent, his eyes locked on Yandy, watching every word she spoke as if searching for answers that still weren't there. His silence added fuel, making the chaos around him feel even more volatile. Friends in the room split instantly. Some sided with Yandy, saying confession was an act of love. Others echoed Sierra, declaring emotional betrayal unforgivable. The divide deepened, turning one marriage into everyone's battlefield. The tension reached a fever pitch. It wasn't just about mistakes anymore. It was about what could and could not be repaired. Honesty clashed against unforgivable truth, and in the middle of it all, the future of their marriage hung by a thread. Yandy broke down, her sobs raw and unrestrained, echoing through the room with a force no one could ignore. She wasn't holding back anymore. Tears streamed as her words cracked, spilling pain and desperation in equal measure. The confession had shattered her, and now the breakdown played out for the world to see. Outside that room, the internet erupted. Clips spread within minutes. Hashtags flooded timelines. Some called her brave for admitting the unthinkable. Others labeled her reckless, saying the confession destroyed the very thing she was trying to save. The debate was instant, and it was merciless. Meanwhile, Mendeecees sat in silence, his face hardened with disbelief. His voice finally cut through the noise, filled with bitterness and exhaustion. "How can I trust you again?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It was the very center of their future. Proposals began to fly from every corner. Friends urged therapy, pleading that professional help could mend what words had broken. Others suggested time apart, a pause to breathe, to reflect, to decide. And then came the darkest option whispered aloud. Maybe it was time to end it. The cast watched helplessly as the marriage unraveled before them. No one could contain it. No one could rewind it. The meltdown had already gone viral, and now every tear, every pause, every word would be dissected online. The night had started with confession. It ended with a haunting question. Could a love once admired by millions survive the weight of betrayal and the judgment of the world? Just when the tension felt unbearable, another bomb dropped. A friend spoke up, claiming there was written proof. Messages, words that couldn't be denied, screenshots that painted a story bigger than Yandy's confession. The entire room shifted in an instant. Gasps cut through the silence. All eyes snapped back to Yandy, waiting for her reaction. She shook her head quickly, her voice trembling as she fought back. "It's not what you think." She repeated it, desperate, to take control of a moment already spiraling away, but the damage was done. The hint of receipts was enough to change everything. The room leaned in, hungry for clarity. Castmates whispered in disbelief, some covering their mouths, others staring with wide, unblinking eyes. For Mendeecees, the revelation was more than humiliating. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about being embarrassed, being blindsided, on camera, in front of his peers, and now in front of the world. His pride collided with his pain, and the mixture burned like fire. The tension snapped into two camps. Some defended Yandy, saying the truth of the messages might not be what it seemed. Others declared that the very existence of them proved her betrayal went deeper than she admitted. She tried to explain, insisting the words were twisted, taken out of context. But the more she denied, the heavier the room grew. Every second felt like another layer of trust crumbling to dust. Loyalty clashed with humiliation, and the second bomb left everyone wondering, was this the moment the marriage finally detonated? Then came the final shockwave. Someone claimed a late-night call had been overheard. A voice, a whisper, a conversation that sounded far too intimate to dismiss. The revelation sent suspicion skyrocketing. The air thickened with doubt, sharper than before, heavier than ever. Mendeecees' eyes narrowed, the weight of the claim pressing down on him. Yandy shook her head furiously, insisting it was a misunderstanding, nothing more than innocent words taken out of context. But the denial only fueled the fire. The question wasn't whether she crossed a line, it was whether she had already crossed it again. The night spiraled fast. Voices overlapped, emotions surged, and the energy in the room cracked like thunder. trust, already shattered, now felt beyond repair. And yet, just as suddenly as the chaos erupted, silence fell. Heavy. Suffocating. The kind of silence that lingers long after the shouting stops. The cameras caught everything. The confession, the accusations, the breakdown. And now the suspicion of something even darker hiding in the shadows. A marriage once admired had unraveled before the world's eyes, piece by painful piece. And then the focus turned outward. To the viewers, to the fans who had followed this love story for years. The question was no longer just for Yandy or Mendeecees. It was for everyone watching. Is this where forgiveness begins? Or is this the final straw?